Hi, everybody. Thanks for jumping in. We'll go ahead and get started here in a minute. Karen, I got to double check with you first. Can you still see my screen okay? Fantastic. All right, we'll go ahead and get started on the hour, as I know it's probably lunch for a lot of folks, and we want to honor your time here. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Joe Wykowski. I'm a former special education teacher and administrator, and now working with Curipod. And I'm so excited to introduce Karen Philhart. She is a technology training specialist with Chino Valley USD, an adjunct professor at the University of La Verne, and in general, a jack of all trades, former SPED, elementary teacher, tech enthusiast, all things technology. So really excited to learn from her today. A quick note in terms of our agenda. We'll be giving you a very brief overview to Curipod, give you a chance to participate as a student so you can see some of the interactive components and AI feedback in real time. And then we'll jump into the real meat and potatoes of our conversation today. Karen talking about what does this look like in practice at Chino Valley and what sparked her interest and continues to excite her about Curipod. And then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. We do have a chat button here if you'd like to participate that way, but again, we'll have some opportunities for you to participate synchronously with us and engage in the content. All right, let's jump into it. So what is Curipod? For those joining today, if this is the first time you've heard of it, Curipod's an AI-powered digital platform designed to enhance classroom engagement through interactive lessons and AI student feedback. So what does that mean? Well, I've had the opportunity to be at several conferences recently, talking with people like Karen and district leaders like herself, and hearing a couple of different themes. One is declining student engagement and attendance with chronic absenteeism coming out of COVID. You know, that post-COVID world, many districts are trying to move toward more student agency, more blended learning, opportunities for students to think, pair, share. That's kind of the pedagogical framework that underpins Curipod. We want students having really exciting learning opportunities and then collaborating on that work. So that's one thing Curipod is really great in supporting. Number two is writing that's actually engaging. I hear often that, how do we get students writing? How do we make it fun, but actually that they're progressing and learning? So you'll get a quick exposure to that and get to hear from Karen a little bit more about writing specifically. And then the third thing that I hear a lot recently, and it's a common refrain, is just teachers that feel overworked. I was at a presentation earlier this week where I think the number of ed tech tools had almost quadrupled in the last couple of years, which is great in theory, but if there's so many tools out there, teachers don't have time to do one more thing. And so how can we create tools that are embedded within the framework, the pedagogical framework, and that have a low barrier to entry for teachers? So we're going to go ahead and start. I'm going to preview my screen on here, and I would love for you to participate on your end. What you will see here is on the left is the student experience. On the right is the teacher here. So I'll go ahead and paste this in the chat for you to participate. And then I will enter the pin over here for the student experience. One thing you'll notice right away, if you're new to Curipod, is there's fun little nicknames. So this is great for a couple of reasons, but mainly that students who feel comfortable or do not feel as comfortable participating have the opportunity to have a nickname, a moniker, so that they can participate and feel safe doing so. We'll go ahead and start the activity. And what we're going to do here is I would just love to hear from you and better understand, what are you hoping to learn today? What brought you here today? What's kind of resonating with you? What made you click on that webinar link to join us today? I'll go ahead and give you 40 seconds to go ahead and share your answer there. If at any point you get stuck, you can see me modeling the student experience on this side. Okay, so what you just saw is an example of an opportunity to participate. Now you're going to get a chance to vote on each other's answers and see what's resonating for those around you or what they're focused on. So you're going to pick here Of the two, what resonated with you the most, or what kind of aligns with your thinking?
I am loving these responses, Joe.
Yeah, it's fun to see in real time. And you can think about as a teacher, right? It's we our founder talks about it's almost tricking the students into engaging with each other's learning. It's facilitating those collaborative experiences. And I love that people are talking about writing. CAASPP is obviously top of mind. How are others using Curipod? That's great. I love that as well. And this is indicative of what it's like in a classroom. People are focused, they're writing, and then there's this buzz in the classroom when it's time to vote. Okay, so number one on the podium, how can Curipod help me increase student writing proficiency? That sounds like something that's pretty important. I think Karen will be a good resource for that. I want to see how others are using Curipod. I know it's fantastic. I just want more ideas to share with the teachers and administrators. Love that. Glad the word is spreading. More about CAASPP test prep. I might have planted that myself. Okay, so we see a theme, right, around writing and CAASPP, which is great. That's what we're going to talk about today. Now you're going to get to experience a short answer response on the CAASPP as a student. So what I've done is I previously created a prompt to focus around basketball. We just came out of March Madness. If you're like me, you really enjoyed watching that. So again, on the right is the teacher experience. Here's the passage that's meant to emulate the CAASPP experience. And what we've done on our end is you're going to have a passage that emulates what they might see on the test in terms of the rigor and the length of the assignment. Karen, I think we have a lot of educators here today. You can just read through this, breeze through it really quickly for our purposes today. Students, though, have the materials on their side here so they can refer back when they're looking for text-dependent evidence and what have you. They have that on their screen here. Then students will have...
Plus that favorite AA. Don't skip the AA at the bottom, because for students and accessibility, they can enlarge the font. They can also, the focus and slides button gives them a nice view, making it easy for them to see the passage.
Thank you, Karen. I very much appreciate that. Yes, they can zoom in or zoom out
as they see fit. It's the SPED teacher in me.
That's right. And then, yes, students can always go back. They can never move forward. So if they need to refer back to things, or we now can translate the text into their native language and they need to see it in their native language, they can do that as well. Okay, we're going to skip the activity today, but this would be a prompting, priming activity to get students excited about writing and kind of create some background knowledge for students to look at each other's learning before they jump into that. And here's the prompt. How has basketball's accessibility contributed to its global popularity and cultural influence? Support your answer with evidence from the text. You're going to have 1 minute to write a robust, incredible CAASPP response. Again, the slides are here, your materials are here. If you're a little more hesitant to participate today, you can watch me on my side. 1 minute, go. Okay.
If by chance you're on a Chromebook or you have it enabled on your Windows device, you can dictate your answer. So for some of our students, we've had them dictate their answers, and that way we can get an idea of where their thoughts are, not just how their keyboarding is.
I love that. Karen, when they're doing that, do they have, like, are they having time to plan separately, or do they just do it in the moment? Like, what does that look like for the student?
It varies. It varies on the teacher and the space. Sometimes we have to move the students, spread them out a little bit, because not all our students have headsets with mics. So it can get a little noisy.
Yeah, no, but I like that. That's great. Okay, what I'm going to do on my end is give feedback now. So you will see the AI feedback. I see an IDK. We've got some middle school typical answers in the crowd today, which I love. On your end, you'll see the AI feedback. So a couple of things I want to point out here. Our philosophy in the research shows we want feedback that's timely, specific, and a part of the learning process. So you can see here it's obviously timely, right? The student is getting into the moment. You're not having a grade on your Sunday afternoon where the student has thought about God knows what in terms of their social realm. They get the feedback right now in the moment. It's specific to them. And then it includes, as part of that learning process, what is their next step? So for me, I did a great job mentioning how basketball's accessibility contributed to its popularity. I need to focus on providing specific evidence and include specific details from the text. Okay, remember that when we talk about our next steps here. So that's great. I can see the answers up here on the board. If I want to have a conversation with blended learning, again, bring it in the classroom, talking about it, I can do that. Karen, anything you want to add from your end that you've seen in terms of the feedback and how students respond to that in classrooms?
I think the biggest thing that they've said is they just get it right away. Because, for example, when I taught fifth grade, my students would write an essay or a story or whatever. Now I have 34 of them at one point to grade. They're not going to get them back a minute later or 30 seconds later or 15 seconds later.
Yeah.
So they really appreciate that right after they've written it, they get feedback on what they could do, their glow and grow, so to speak.
Love it. And then what's great here is, and I've seen this in a classroom, there's lots of different ways to do this, but one example, a teacher, they had their feedback, did a metacognitive activity where they wrote down in a graphic organizer, okay, how am I going to improve? What are my next steps? Turned to their table partner, had a discussion about that. They voted as a classroom here, and then they had a chance to do it again. Again, remember, you can go back as a student and look at your previous answers. I can think about, copying over what I still want to include. How am I going to improve? It's right there in the moment, specific to me. Real quick before I turn over to Karen, that was our CAASPP test prep. What I would say for those interested in exploring more is Curipod can do a lot of things. You can generate a full lesson based on standard subject content area that will include a lot of these interactive activities. In science, it's great. You can do our AI whiteboard and do a water cycle and evaluate, get feedback there. In social studies, you can have a conversation with a historical figure and have AI feedback there. We have immersive writing activities, quick writes, just lots of different ways to get students writing. And then you can also curify your slides. So if you have core curricula that has slides or your own that you've built over time, you can bring those into our platform, make it more interactive, make sure students get that feedback. Okay, enough from me. I'd like to turn it over to the star of the show, Ms. Karen Phil Hart here. You've heard theoretically what Curipod can do. I'd love to hear, Karen, can you share a little bit more about what this has looked like in practice at Chino Valley?
Absolutely. So I met, literally, I met Eirik and Jens. They came out and did a lesson with some of our sixth graders at one of our sites coming up from Curipod. It was brand new in the US and it just took off instantly. One of my colleagues, Stephanie, is an attendee and she knows we've seen it. Michelle Lugo, I went and played in her room, was as one of the early ones, and she's in this. And I think it's great to show that off because it was so easy for teachers to use and that instant feedback. Now, and once the CAASPP results came in, that just blew everything out of the water. I sat down last spring and asked a friend of mine if I could come into her classroom. And this is a teacher who is not comfortable with tech, doesn't use educational technology much in her classroom beyond like a Google Doc, here and there. And I was literally in the middle of the Curipod when she said, "Can you stay after?" And I go, "Yeah." Ran next door to her neighbor, asked her neighbor if she had time for me to come into her class. So I was planning on one class. I ended up doing two classes and then going back the next day for a third class because we saw the results right away. At that time, they didn't have the rewrite feature built in. So we had the students do the writing, copy and paste it into Google Docs. And then I could have just duplicated the activity, but instead I closed the session and restarted a new session, got back to that writing. And in that time, they went through and did some proofreading and kind of tweaking of their report. Then when I got back to that activity slide, they just pasted in their answers. So you could even do this as if you wanted to do the whole pre-writing activity, have them do it in Google Docs or Word. If you didn't know, side little tip, if the students are already logged in, if you type doc.new for a Google Doc or word.new, it instantly opens up a blank one and they're ready to go. So
That's
that
great,
was
Karen.
huge. Yeah, there's a lot of files. If you type .new on the end, it opens up.
So that's why I said you're a jack of all trades. Karen, can I ask you a question real quick on that?
Yes.
What is it about Curipod that resonated with the teacher who's been teaching for so many years? Like What do you think it was that really stood out to her?
It's funny because I've asked her that, and she just said the feedback was instant and it took so much off of her plate. Because for her, she was teaching sixth grade. The classroom she sent me next door into next was a 5-6 combo. And having taught a combo, it's a lot because you've got two different curriculums going on and two different sets of standards. And while there's some things that cross over, Curipod did all the heavy lifting. I still could go in and I could tweak, like maybe I wanted to ask this question instead, but it was the first draft for me. And I think the other thing I noticed is I was asked as an adjunct to do a webinar or a seminar actually for other adjuncts at the university. These are people, again, who are not techie. Technology is not their thing. They teach reading and literacy to future teachers. I used Curipod as my just introduction, just like, hey, so we get to know the group. And so I have an idea of what I'm going to do. Immediately, my co-facilitator, Brian, and I had to redo the whole morning because they all wanted to learn Curipod. These are teachers who came reluctantly in to learn about some ed tech tools. And it everywhere we've done it, it's just caught on like wildfire because it's easy. It gives that feedback. It uses that CAASPP rubric. So for example, on the longer rights, that 442 rubric, and it opened up a great conversation with the students about 2 points because they were so worried about their spelling and their punctuation and are they, putting the sentence together correctly. And I said, look, it's only 2 points. 8 points is your creativity and your details and you're following the prompt. Only 2 are those conventions. And
Yeah,
it allowed them to open up and like write bigger vocabulary,
love it.
use those larger words because spelling didn't matter as much.
Great. Thank you, Karen, for sharing.
Sure.
Do you want to jump in and tell us a little bit more about how it's being used from there? Yeah.
We have used it in K through 12. I mean, across the grade level. I was doing a training for another app because we have Google and Microsoft apps in our district. So as Stephanie knows, we know about 40 apps that we have to train on. And I had finished it and she goes, oh, can you come by to my classroom afterwards and do something fun? And I had just learned about Curipod. And I said, okay, well, what has your class done recently? I think it was a ninth grade class. I know it was high school. And she said, we just finished reading The Great Gatsby. I'm like, great, hold on. I go to curipod.com. I put in that I need a deck on The Great Gatsby. Within a minute, we had a deck with activities. And we used one of the slides that had the voting, like we did, obviously, with the sample with Joe. And the students were voting on which answer they liked. And it was some deep thing about, analyzing some event in The Great Gatsby. Again, I haven't read The Great Gatsby since 19. And so it wasn't a lesson I easily could have done. In my role, I have to go into classrooms from K through 12. Now I taught preschool, kindergarten, second grade, fifth grade. I have my secondary credential. I taught special ed, but I haven't literally taught every single grade level. So when I go in to do a sample lesson, Curipod has saved me so often because I can say, oh, what standard are you working on? Even if I don't know what they are, I can pull it up. Curipod brings it up. And what we saw in this classroom is the top vote answer. We asked the students, okay, who was that? Because on the teacher side, you can see it. And we said, you don't have to, but if you want to admit to it. And so one student raised her hand. She had gotten the top vote and she was a very quiet student in the classroom. She had a smile as big as the state of California on her face because her peers had chosen her and they don't know who everyone is. And
Right.
those nicknames are randomly assigned. So they don't even get to choose their nickname, which really helps in cases if you have middle schoolers. So I think that's the ease of use, the student engagement, just the quickness of it. Like literally, I went into the room and she's like, can you do a lesson right now? Sure,
Yeah.
give me a minute. And we did it and had a great time.
I love that. And I was in a classroom and I knew who had done the answer and you could see their face beaming, but they didn't want to share and that was okay. But they still had that moment.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more, Karen. I know you put together this whole workbook here about state testing resources. Do you want to walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. So because some of our teachers were newer to using Curipod, I started creating some sample lessons because we saw results at one school that were huge. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so I started making decks in Curipod. Now, some of these I made with the older templates because Curipod is constantly changing and growing and listening to what we're asking for, like the rewrite feature, which I
Right.
asked for and you gave it to me. Thank you. So this is, I just created a deck in Canva because we're Google and Microsoft, it's a nice, I call it the agnostic platform because you don't have to
Right.
worry if people like one or the other. Organized by grade level, and many of these templates that are in here are using the Smarter Balance sample passages. So the grade levels there are hyperlinked. So Joe, if you want to just pick one of
Yeah.
them.
Do you have a favorite? I was going to wait, but yeah, go ahead.
I
And then
started with fifth and sixth, so any of those.
yeah, let's go
So
ahead and
some
jump
of
in
them,
here.
the early ones that I did, it's got the Smarter Balance passage. We originally, Curipod did not have the passage for students to read. I mean, they did, but it was a text box that was like, letters that were this tiny, which for some young eyes that were great, for my eyes, it was not. So I would put the text in a Google Doc, provide a paper copy of the Google Doc, and the students would practice on that. Now Curipod has it right there in the deck. So some of these I'll be updating, and this is a
Yeah.
living, growing document. I add more to this all the time. And so that way, if you're not sure how to start with Curipod, pick your grade level, and there's samples in there for narrative, for your opinion, your explanatory, your informative, everything ready to go.
I bet your teachers love you for that. That sounds great.
I hope so.
Yeah. Okay. Are you ready to talk about case study and data? Great. Well, I could give a quick, Karen, we've been working with Karen and really excited. This is I believe the first day that it's public, but I've been working on a case study because again, we know that all these tools are really great, but we want to see how it impacts students at the end of the day. Because that's what is most important, is supporting students. So Karen, walk us through a little bit about the data that you're seeing in Chino Valley.
So this is huge. So last spring, about, I would say a month before testing season, I asked a teacher if I could come in and try one of the test prep writing templates with her class. Again, she is not an ed tech teacher. She is not comfortable with technology. It's, she always comes in, Karen's the guru. I'm like, well, okay, we're gonna get you there. And so I did this lesson with her class and she loved it. Like I said, she took me to other classes. I was in 4 different classes, I think by the end of the week, at a school that rarely invites us to come out because it's not their thing for whatever reason. Some people embrace ed tech and some people kind of keep it at arm's length. Curipod got us in at a school repeatedly. What we noticed is when results came out, the growth was crazy. So if you look on this chart, that's the same group of students between 5th grade, where 50% of them were above or near standard. And then when they were 6th graders who used Curipod, again, maybe 3 or 4 times before state testing, just because of time and fitting it in, 73%. And I said to the teacher, I said to the teachers in that grade level, I said, well, okay, that also reflects on you and the growth and the hard work that you've done. And they go, yeah, don't give us that much credit. It was Curipod. And they were very humble about it. And I'm sure it was also partly due to them, but they said Curipod just made it so easy, especially in the area of writing, because you've got your IABs and your FIABs, you've got this practice tests online, but the writing and the response, the feedback, they didn't have to go back in to try to respond to the feedback. Curipod did it, the heavy lifting, and that was huge. But to see that much growth from 1 month, I am so excited to see what that growth is going to look like this year when they've been using it all year now.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick, but of those 3 ways I see at the bottom, I just love the authentic learning community. The fact that it's like a social collaborative piece, I think is just so great, and that students are really excited about writing. That's pretty incredible. Anything else you want to say about that, Karen?
I think the biggest thing that their students appreciated from what the students told me is because I asked them too. I said, "This is a new tool. I want to get your opinion," which they thought that was the coolest either. That some adult wanted to hear what their opinion was, but they appreciated having the feedback immediately. They said, "When our teacher does it, we know she works hard, but we don't see it for a week,
Yeah.
and then by then they don't even remember what they wrote in the first place."
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
this allows them to make those changes immediately. And we had them, when we did it the second time, I said, well, how many of you increased your score? And at least a third of the room brought up their score. And on a 10-point scale, that's, pretty hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so cool. Okay, I know we're short on time, Karen.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to hear from you, tell me about tips for other educators using Curipod. You talked to me about the Chromebook accessibility. Tell me about that. Tell me about how you can share this with other teammates.
I think the biggest thing is if you've got someone techie who's willing to make some of those decks or split it up. Especially for me, having taught at a grade level where, I would do the reading, another would do the math, the ELA, have someone in your grade level like, okay, I'll do the social studies decks. I'll make the science decks. I'll make the reading decks. I'll make the writing decks. There are so many choices in there and you can share those links. So just like I did with that state testing booklet, there are opportunities in there. There's pre-built, you can choose a standard. I mean, literally, we've all had those days where the students either finished a lesson quickly or you have half an hour you have to fill time with. Within Curipod, you could have that lesson with content and those activities built in about a minute, if that. And I think that's a game changer.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Thank you, Karen. I could listen to you chat a little bit more. I see just there the how. So a couple of different ways you can share with links, but you can also organize across with the school subscription across your school or across your district, right? So if you need to adjust things, edit them, you want to make sure that you have horizontal and vertical alignment, you could do that and share that amongst your team. So that's the long, we call it crawl, walk, run. That's the run. When you're crawling at first, it would just encourage you to get in there, use the lesson generator, use the CAASPP test prep, just have fun with it and start to play around in there. And I think you'll be surprised. So I'm looking at time. I want to make sure we go ahead and I see this again. I'm going to Mr. and Mr. Bryant, I'm going to give you a chance to ask that question here. So I'll go ahead and start the activity. If you've lost where you are, you can join with this pin still here. I'm going to give you 50 seconds. I want you to just share any lingering questions or things you're thinking about. We'll vote on them and just wrap things up. I'll put my own plug in here. Karen, how do I get started? That's my only question. Or how do I get to work with Karen as soon as possible?
More webinars. They're fun.
They are fun, yeah. This is a quick one you can do during your lunch break too.
Exactly. That's what I appreciate. A lot of the Curipod meetings have been like half an hour. So the ambassador meetups, the webinars, because sometimes that's all we have time for.
Okay, now you're going to get to vote. One thing that's a little bit harder to capture in a virtual environment is, I'm not kidding you, when you'll be in a classroom, you will hear the click clack of typing and then the activity ends. Everybody gets upset for a second because they're like, oh, and then it's conversation right away. So you get that kind of buzz of the student engagement. Oh, I want to hear about this. Macbeth immersive writing.
I was going to say, I bet that's my colleague, Stephanie. She's been doing it like crazy too.
I'm ending voting early. I'm sorry to those affected. Do I get data at the end of the lesson? You do. I'm happy to send a follow-up there. You get a full summary for the entire class in terms of what are our trends across the classroom, misconceptions, areas of growth, and some next steps. So you get that comprehensive, and then each individual student glows and grows. Each activity, what were all the participation there? How much does a school individual teachers has to look for math? I will follow up. I have your information, jump into that a little bit more. We can kind of customize. We do just do school and district subscriptions. And for math, there's a lot of great components with the AI whiteboard, and I'll make sure to follow up with you individually with some math specific things. It is free to get started. Go create an account. We have incredible things like when you're ready, a Curie lunch where you can meet with one of our founders. They'll prep you for how to present it to the rest of your teammates, send you a gift card for snacks, because we know teachers love snacks, and get started. But yes, jump in there and participate as soon as you can. How do we get started? That was me. I love this. A lesson on Macbeth, and had some really deep discussion. That's incredible. Love it. To close today, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I am going to send you, after our webinar today, We do have a one-pager that will include links to some of the resources that Karen shared, our new case study, as well as this deck. Please, 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 as you're getting in there, I'll just make a plug for this little orange box in the corner. You will talk to a real person who will answer your question directly and make sure you have what you need. So please explore the platform and ask questions as they come up. You can get started by just going to curipod.com and creating an account. And please join our community or host a Curie Lunch. We want to hear from you. We're really starting to grow in California, and we really love to hear from teachers and educators. What is top of mind for you? What do you need to be successful so that it's just not one more thing? Karen, thank you again for your time. It was incredible learning from you, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your week, and good luck. If you've about to engage on the CAASPP test, good luck. If you're finished with that already, I hope you have a great rest of the school year.